This has long been on the cards for quite a while now, because the deal has been continually going through the works for months and months, really. We were all expecting this to get finalised, but it does kind of bite that Royal Mail is going to get sold off to a Czech billionaire, Daniel Kretinsky, and this has been approved by the government. Seems very sad that this is happening right now, but we all knew that it was coming. So the trade union that represents posties, the Communication Workers Union, of which I am also a member, they've been fighting with the desire of the previous owners of Royal Mail to attack the contracts that they have, try and minimise their pay terms and conditions, try and fatten up the juicy pig that is Royal Mail to be sold off to turn into pork bellies by Daniel Kretinsky and the potential investment they were going to get from elsewhere. Trying to minimise the conditions of workers is the way in which you try and increase the share price. Shows you why capitalists and workers have materially opposed material interests. But there you go. And it's been approved, of course, by the Competition Markets Authority, who could be getting in the way of this and try and stop this sell-off, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how integral to society this British institution is. That won't stop people from wanting it to be carved up and sold to the highest bidder. Sold by the pound, as Phil Collins would say. The fact that the takeover is only 3.6 billion shows you how tiny the market cap was. The actual market cap was probably around about 5 billion in my mind. So it'd probably be the kind of cost that paid to the state to take it over, which they could do again for peanuts, right? When you're in the single figures of billions, a state buyout here is more than reasonable. It's more than reasonable to put this national institution back into public hands. It's not unreasonable to do it. It's not expensive to do it. It makes sense from a logistical perspective, given that it's, again, another natural monopoly. It's another inelastic market. Very few people are competing to post letters. The idea this should be privatised in the first place, very, very, very silly. Let alone putting it in the hands of somebody who's going to take all that money offshore because he's not domiciled in the United Kingdom. So it's just the worst possible decision they could have made. And all it's done is, as I said, has undermined the terms and conditions of the posties with the people that I actually care about. Apparently, the government will retain a so-called golden share that will require it to approve any major changes to Royal Mail's ownership, HQ location, and tax residency. If you're going to do that, just run it yourself. If you want this much control, just have it in public ownership. Have it work for the public good rather than for private profit. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said, while it was up to the shareholders to approve the deal, the agreement the government had reached meant the takeover would be a good deal for the UK, be a good deal for the people who work for Royal Mail, and a good deal for its customers. Look at my Labour Party, chat. Look at the Labour Party. The party of the workers, the party of state involvement in the economy, the party that built some of the most precious public services in the history of the United Kingdom, looking at the national institution of the Royal Mail and approving its sell-off to Daniel Kretinsky and saying that it's the best deal for the UK and for the workers and for consumers as well. The Labour Party in 2024, chat's what it looks like under Keir Starmer. This is where I would usually say, oh, well, there are so many people on the right who call themselves patriots, who call themselves nationalists, who call themselves monarchists, who believe in protecting British institutions and that they're very happy to see private capital have access to our precious institutions, our precious historical totemic institutions like Royal Mail that's been around for centuries as an institution, that is inexplicably linked to the people who they deify within the monarchy as well. And yet they're very happy to see private capital have access to it. And then I realised that I'm the one who's wrong here. It's in a turnout for the books, chat. I mean, you will not believe this. The party who most disagrees with Royal Mail being sold off is Reform UK. It's Reform UK supporters who disagree with this the most. 71% unacceptable selling off Royal Mail to Daniel Kretinsky, with only 18% in support. The lowest score of all voter groups from the last election with regards to Royal Mail sell-off. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of people here whose problem isn't with the billionaire part, it's with the Czech part of being a Czech billionaire. But even so, it should be in public hands. I mean, of course, a supermajority of the public support Royal Mail remaining in public hands, or going back into public hands, because it's been privatised already. It's privatised by the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrat handlers from 2010. coalition government. So that was never a popular decision to take. It was never popular. And Vince Cable, remember, sold it off at a bargain basement price, and the shares shot up in value immediately as soon as it was sold off. So thank you, Vince Cable, for that. Really appreciate it. And the electoral grouping who finds this the most acceptable, with the lowest disapproval and the highest approval of the sell-off of Royal Mail to a Czech billionaire, to Labour Party voters. Look at the state of the Labour Party in 2024. This also shows you, of course, a couple of things. It shows you who Labour are appealing to now. Labour are actually appealing to centrists and liberal types rather than people who support democratic socialist policy. It also shows you how much political parties lead their voters and not the other way around. Because you would never see polling like this 7 years ago. Jeremy Corbyn said that Royal Mail should be in public hands at the time, so it would have been difficult to support that party without believing this. But the idea that the Labour Party should be the people who find this the least unacceptable is crazy to me. Even Conservative voters oppose this more than Labour Party voters. Of course, we don't know about the Green numbers. We don't know about people who support any other kind of left-wing party or the SNP, but that's by the by. But if you just look at the top four parties, Labour are the ones who support it the most. And we've seen this happen in other areas of policy too. So since Labour turned to the right on welfare policy and on migration policy, the people who support the Labour Party have changed their position on these issues too. So previously, before Labour started talking about how much they're going to crack down on welfare claimants, Labour Party voters and supporters thought that the benefit entitlements were too strict. And now, since Labour have changed tack, they think they're not strict enough. All they do is get followed. They get led by the Pied Piper of Keir Starmer towards right-wing reactionary policy. They get led towards it by a leadership that tells them it's the right thing to do. The tail is now wagging the dog. This is obviously another bombshell, since Labour said that we should keep water privatised, and even Richard Tice says it should be nationalised. For the second time in a week, we now have the Reform UK electorate and their politicians to the left of the Labour Party.
Will Royal Mail deliver better customer service now a cheque is in the post? Get it? Now, the government has approved the £5.3 billion sale of Royal Mail to the EP Group, owned by the Czech billionaire Daniel Kretinsky. Royal Mail's universal service obligation to deliver to every address across the UK 6 days a week at a standard price will be maintained as part of the deal, say the government. Now, obviously, Mr. Kretinsky is a wonderful man, since he owns 27% of West Ham United. Angela.
I think this is really interesting. The Royal Mail has been deteriorating for some time now, and I think if you worked in the Royal Mail or you're a customer of the Royal Mail, you've been really concerned what's going on.
Weird. I wonder what happened reasonably recently that caused the standard of Royal Mail to deteriorate. I wonder what that might be, Baroness Smith. Do you want to enlighten us on anything that might have changed in the operation of Royal Mail in, say, the last 14 years or so? Was there a specific point where that might have been something that caused the standards of Royal Mail to slip? Answers on a postcard.
I don't think, no, when I last had a daily post, or things haven't arrived late. I think this is different when we saw the privatisation previously. The government has a golden share. They've worked with the trade unions and the workers and the workforce there to sort of protect them. And there are certain conditions that it can't be taken out of the country as well. So a number of issues there that Johnny Reynolds, as business secretary, has baked into the agreement. So, I want to be optimistic about this and think it could really work. It could make a difference. I hope so. But I just think I would give the question of the day to Stephen from East Grinstead.
I think we can all agree on that.
Well, I hope that it's going to be good. You're a politician. You're a baroness. Surely you can have an opinion better than, well, I hope Jonathan Reynolds knows what he's doing. Spoiler alert, I don't think he does.
Matt Rack, how your colleagues in the CWU, what have they, I don't know if you followed what they've been saying.
I have followed what they do, obviously. So my colleagues in the Communication Workers Union, I think their starting point would be the same as mine, which is Royal Mail should be in public ownership and in public hands.
True.
And I think that's the view of the vast majority of people across the country. And it is what we see is partially, at least, a result of the failure of privatisation. However, they've got to deal with the situation they face, and I believe they have had meetings with the new owners with guarantees about protecting service levels and some of the industrial relations which has been badly damaged in the past few years. So I think there is some positive on that front, but it doesn't address the fundamental problem that's about the failed privatisation of Royal Mail.
Well,
Exactly.
believe it or not, Matt, I'm quite close to the CWU, and I think your description of their position is 100% accurate. James?
Well, again, because the problems stem from the fact that it's a natural monopoly. It costs way more to deliver to John O'Groats than it does to Walthamstow, of course, for obvious reasons, but everyone should have access to the universal service obligation. That is a conflict with private profit. That doesn't even take into account the fact that the workers' rights that have been hard fought for are less likely to be protected when the company has an interest in maximising returns, rather than putting that money back into service delivery, which they could do if it was nationalised, which it did do whilst it was nationalised. And even then, as has been pointed out in chat, even with the golden share to be able to safeguard from privatisation conflicts of interest, you actually have to rely on the government to put its foot down to stop changes if they do try and do them, which of course I don't have any confidence they would do. even the American government owns their post service. And the fact that we have a privatised system and the Americans don't shows you how far wrong we are.
Scarlett?
Yeah, I hope it does do better. It's been pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking. Yeah, and I mean, I really don't rely on it very much. But yeah, I hope it is improved. I think you're right though about Matt's point about the public wanting it to be in public ownership. They're not particularly thrilled. I think that things like that do become privatised, especially when that becomes botched. But we'll see if this manages to persuade them otherwise.
And that's a really important point, specifically around trying to convince the public of this. Of course, they managed to convince Labour voters to just follow the dear leader regardless. But the public are massively, massively support nationalisation of Royal Mail. It would cost so little. It would cost so little for the Labour government to just nationalise it. We have £5.3 billion market cap. It's peanuts in government spending. And it would be incredibly popular across the spectrum. And again, we showed you the graph, right? Labour are desperate. They're desperate to win back over Reform UK supporters, so much so that they're aping all of their lines on welfare and migration. All of these Reform UK positions that the Labour government very, very happy to ape their concerns of. Yet Reform UK supporters were the people who really, really, really want to see this thing in public hands and oppose the sell-off to Daniel Kretinsky. And Labour are going, no, it's actually best for the country to do this. Like, on all of the worst opinions of Reform UK supporters, the Labour government are following them, are taking the lead, are having the tail wagged by Reform UK's policy direction. Yet on the very few actually good things that Reform UK members support and Reform UK voters support, such as national ownership of key infrastructure and key industries, they refuse to go along with them. Like, actually, we really enjoy working with Daniel Kretinsky and with BlackRock. It's a recipe for electoral disaster. Like, think how much electoral goodwill they could buy with the $5.3 billion it would take to renationalise Royal Mail. Yeah, I can't believe Davos man turned out like this. And that's the thing, is that you know full well that the Reform UK supporter response to this is going to be, well, of course Keir Starmer would like it being bought out by this foreign billionaire, because he's the one who went to Davos and said he preferred it to Westminster. They said they were partnering with BlackRock. This means that Keir Starmer is bought out by the globalist elite superstructure, and he is doing their bidding by selling off our important institutions to them. And I'm saying, it's just capitalism. Like, it's just capitalism. It's just a capitalist doing a capitalism and being supported by capitalists. There's not a globalist cabal that's out to get you. It's just the profit motive and the natural consequences of capitalist market economics. Like, what else do you want me to say? There's already this incredibly large skepticism from the radical right of politics towards upwardly mobile, wealthy foreign individuals and seeing them as somehow usurpers, as if they weren't being usurpers when they came in corporate clothing under a branding name, to carve out the local economies of our country and replace them with identikit chains. You know, these are all part and parcel of the same structure of global neoliberal free market capitalism, right? But if you can put a face to the name, when it comes to like Daniel Kretinsky, or when you can put it as a unique evil like BlackRock, suddenly it stops being about the system of capitalism and it turns into the globalist conspiracy theory. And if Labour want to try and force politics away from this, they have to stop allowing themselves to be open to attacks as being the party of the globalist cabal. And they're doing the exact opposite. They're doing the exact opposite by allowing our institutions to get sold off to wealthy billionaires from abroad and allowing trillion-pound asset managers access to our economy and to buy out our infrastructure. It's all part and parcel of the same terrible electoral strategy, and it was going to see the rise of Reform UK. Like, they're trying to win over Tory voters, trying to use Reform UK's language on social policy and completely ignoring this gaping chasm of electoral support for populist economics.
And I suppose we should remember it was Ed Davey and Vince Cable who privatised it, wasn't it? It was, people always think of privatisation. It was Conservatives. Okay, it was a Conservative Lib Dem coalition, but it was the Lib Dem. It was the Lib Dems. What did it? We have a Lib Dem.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you're watching this, future TikTok viewer, this is why you should never, ever, ever trust the Liberal Democrats. Right? There are loads of people who I know who are upset with the Labour Party for being a bit too right-wing on some social issues. And whilst I think the Liberal Democrats are reasonably socially progressive, and I welcome that, when it comes to the economy, these people are bought out. These people are free market capitalist ideologues, and they would sell off a public institution like they would sell off your grandmother. They would be very happy selling off public institutions to private hands because that's what they genuinely believe in. It is Vince Cable who you can directly blame for Royal Mail being in the state that it's in at the moment. They are just the Tories, but they wrap themselves up in pride flags to pretend that they're economically progressive when they just aren't. Never vote piss diamond, chat. Just don't do it. If you really want a progressive alternative who has all the socially liberal ideas of the Liberal Democrats, but without being Thatcherites, we have the Green Party, where we are not mean to migrants. We support the rights of trans people, but we also think that working class people should have any money whatsoever, and that allowing free market disaster capitalism to destroy our country is a bad thing. Turns out you can have both of these things. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.